Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Sword Art Online review. This is going to be my review for Sword Art Online, Alternative Gale Online, the volume 1 of this new manga series. So it's just recently come out in English, a few weeks ago actually, but I only managed to get it now. And the big thing about this, the reason I got this and did it, is because obviously when they made the announcement of the Alicization arc getting animated, they also made the kind of surprise announcement that this would be getting an anime adaptation as well. So I thought it was obviously a good idea to get this, review it, and see, is that going to be an anime worth watching? And just from reading volume 1, I think that is an absolute yes. So the details on this. So this manga is the art by Tadadi Tamori, original story by Keiichi Sigsawa, and of course the usual stuff of like created by Reiki Kawahara, and they also say here character design by Kohaku Kuroboshi, and yeah, published by Yen Press. What I actually really like about this is that unlike other Yen Press manga, at least the Girls Op stuff, the kind of cover here has a kind of matte finish to it rather than a kind of glossy finish. Really random point, but it's just a pretty cool little thing. Yeah, so what is this about, first of all, before we get into any of the discussion? Obviously, it's focusing on the VR game GGO Gale Online, which is from the first arc from SAO 2. With Sinon, it's the original game Sinon was in, and I completely get why they'd want to tell more stories in that game, because it's the most different game we've had so far, in that it's not fantasy, swords, magic. It was more sort of like realistic kind of combat shooter with guns, and I think it's a fair point about that arc, that it was so plot focused and Kirito, Sinon, that sort of stuff, that we didn't get the greatest time to really explore that world, that game, because they kind of just had to go character, and here's the tournament where all that kind of plot investigation stuff is going to go down. Here it feels like we're getting a little bit more into the dynamics of the game, while still having the usual Sword Art Online character focus of you care about your main character, you're going to get good action, and the whole VR kind of real world dynamic as you'd expect. In this case, the premise is that our main character kind of comes in and are kind of, through a variety of situations, ends up in the new kind of Bullet of Bullet tournaments, which they're calling the Squad Jam. And the difference between this and the Bullet of Bullets is that while that was solo play, this is squad teams. So teams from 2 players to 6 players all participate in this battle against each other. So it's basically a team-based Bullet of Bullets, and our main character is in a team of 2, which happens over the course of this volume. And basically the volume ends with the action just getting started in the Bullet of Bullet tournaments. We see a little bit of action, not with our main characters, but with some of the other teams, and then it's like they're just about to get back into the action. But how does this all come about? Who is our main character? So the main character, as you can see here on the front, in the game goes by the name Len, L-L-E-N-N. Really do not know if that's the pronunciation on that. It could be something very different, like Ren or something like that. We'll have to see what that is in the anime, but that's her name there. Her name in real life is Karen Kurohi, I think, or something like that. And the idea here is that in real life, Karen is really tall. So they say that she's like 19 years old and she's 6 foot tall. And obviously being in Japan, that's actually really, really notable. So she is so much taller than all of her friends. She just kind of notes that her life has in a way been defined by how tall she is, and that combined with her shyness and kind of struggle with making friends means that she feels somewhat isolated in the real world, and so was kind of looking for some sort of an escape. So a very similar kind of thing that we completely understand from other Sword Art Online kind of characters and their dynamics. In this case, she basically gets into games because she knows that in VR, you can have different types of characters, and the idea is that she plays a bunch of different games and eventually comes across GGO, where you're allowed to have very, very different types of avatars in the game. And so she sticks with GGO because her character is actually really small. So she goes from being really, really tall in real life to being, as some players seem to note, one of the smallest avatars they've ever seen in the game. And so it's that really kind of just height kind of gimmick of she's really tall in real life, but she's really small and quick and agile in the game. And she kind of, over the course of this book, kind of learns to develop that kind of persona and kind of make that distinction between, like, when you're in the game, you don't have to act, you don't have to bring everything from the outside world into the game, that you can actually, you know, put on a little bit of a persona, that it gives her kind of that confidence in a way, with the idea that, you know, she's still herself, but she feels so much more at ease to be confident, and so it seems like it's a different her coming out here when it's just the game giving her the, you know, option to do this. Obviously, she starts off as a standard player. She does the tutorials, you know, gets through the basics, but the key points comes in when she meets this character, Pitohui, Pitohui, who is an older female character who seems to initially take a liking to her, and she kind of teaches Len the ropes, helps her get her kind of signature gun, which is the inside cover of what they focus on here, which is the, what's it called again? The FNP-90, which she calls P-chan. She gives a nickname to her gun called the P-chan, and then obviously we can see from here, she's small. She kind of wears all kind of dull, sort of faded pink, and her gun is the same color. And because of, obviously, we know the color scheme of GGO, it ends up being actually quite good camouflage in the general kind of wasteland areas. So she's kind of surprisingly skillful with how unique her character design is in the game. And the idea here is that Pitohui is the person who really kind of spurs Len on to have the confidence to become better at the game. They become closer, and they make this kind of pledge midway through the volume that basically Pitohui says, you know, if you ever get to the point where I think you are like a challenge for me, that you've kind of met my expectations, then we can actually meet up in real life, because they get to a point where they know each other well enough that they're kind of considering that they're talking a little bit more about the real world stuff. And so they bring up the idea that they may meet in real life. So that's a kind of goal that Len has in mind, to eventually get to that point of this person she's become pretty close friends with in the game. And if she can really prove how skilled she is to her, they'll be able to meet up in real life, and that might be a big kind of confidence builder in real life for her. The challenge kind of comes into play when Pitohui basically says, okay, the next Squad Jam event is coming up, the first one for teams, and I want you to enter it, because she basically says that I can't enter it because I'm surprisingly super busy on that exact day that it's going on, so you kind of enter in my place, I'll get you a team, and you can enter that, and basically the idea is that I expect you to win. They don't say it as such, but they more or less sort of imply that if Len manages to win this with the team that Pitohui has picked for her, then that will probably meet the conditions for being able to meet her in real life. And then that's when we get introduced, Pitohui introduces her to her teammate, and it's just one person. They're allowed to have up to 6 people on the team, but the decision here has been made that Len is going to go into this tournament with just one other teammate. So it'll be a team of 2 versus, for the most part, team of 6s. And that's when we get introduced to her teammate. So she's tiny, of course, as you can see here. And we're introduced to the fairly big, massive character who just goes by M. And we don't learn all that much about him other than that Pitohui knows about him, and there's an agreement between those two. It's kind of implied that they know each other from a good while ago in the game. And from there, it's basically just, it seems like it's going to be this really awkward situation of, like, he seems so intimidating, and we know Karen or Len is fairly shy, and so she's kind of left alone with like this new person who's meant to be her teammate. Thankfully, he turns out to be really nice, and they kind of end up doing a bit of training together and realizing that they may have a really cool dynamic as a team, because she's like the perfect decoy because she has good camouflage, she's really quick, small target, and then he's not a full-on sniper, but he's kind of like a marksman in that he uses a battle rifle that's kind of good for mid-range. And so the idea is that if she can avoid kind of bullets up in the front, he'll pick them off from behind and kind of support her. And then she obviously has some big proving moments in the training against M, where she reveals that actually she's super skilled as well. There's a really cool sequence wherein he teaches her how to use a knife, because up until before this he hasn't. She's only been using that gun that Pito Hui allowed her to get, the P-Chan, the P90 gun. So as her kind of backup weapon, they set it up so that she has a knife as her backup weapon, and that her agility allows her to use that pretty well because she can be really quick in close combat. So there's that. There's some other stuff, like there's a page or two where it's just kind of set up for something to kind of come before. They don't really do much about it, but there's this kind of weird manipulation going on with what seems to be potentially one of the villains. It's a bit creepy, the scene. But I don't really have a lot to say about it because it's only like 2 pages from the entire book, basically. But anyway, the time comes, they enter the tournament, and they go in, they're in the forest, and the first bit of the sequence that we get here is that, like the bullet tournaments, the idea is that there's a scan every couple of minutes that reveals the position of some of the players. In the squad format, the teams, only the squad leader gets highlighted on the map, not every single member of the team. So part of the kind of gimmick of our kind of hero team is that Len is the squad leader, so she'll be highlighted and used as a decoy, whereas like potentially their best player, M, is actually kind of off in the distance as just one guy. So it kind of seems like, oh, there's only one person on this team, they're on their own. Like the squad leader is just left out on their own, and there doesn't seem to be a squad nearby. But that's because there's only one guy nearby, and so you can sort of see when it gets down to it, they might actually have a good shot at doing things. But anyway, they end up getting immediately kind of attacked by a group of, it's kind of like this group that has the gimmick of like they all use machine guns, and so she has this moment where she's dodging between trees to get out of the spray of gunfire. But then that team quickly gets picked off for the most part by this other unit, which seems to be kind of complete military guys. And by the end of the book, the reveal, the cliffhanger at the end, is that actually, like, M very much believes that that team, that full team, is actually made up of like actual combat professionals, that they either are in like the self-defense forces, the army, the police, or something like that, because the stuff that they're doing in the game is not just skills they've learned in the game, but it has to come from the fact that they do some of this stuff in real life. Because the big point that they draw attention to is when one of them rappels down the side of a building to get down really quickly, and M seems to note this, and there's almost an implication with M as well that the same applies to him, because the way he teaches her how to use a knife, they go into great detail about like, okay, people are going to be wearing body armor in this game, so never just stab someone in the stomach. Always like aim for like muscles and like tendons to kind of get them on the ground so they can't fight back. And then if it comes down to it and you have to aim for their face, go in through the eye. And it's just, whoa, like, really? And she learns all of this stuff from him, and it's obviously implied because he, to some degree, knows this, in real life. And then when Pito Hui introduces him, she's very casual about it, but she sort of implies that, like, oh, he's sort of a criminal type, but, he's not that bad. I'll try and see if I can find the exact details that they give about that. What do they say? Oh, yeah, and deep down he's practically a criminal, but he's not a bad guy. So kind of a weird introduction, but that's where we are. And I think overall, I was very kind of pleasantly surprised with this, and it makes me excited to see the anime, because I do like GGO, and I think focusing a separate story on this world works, because I want to see the animators do like more kind of gun combat type stuff in this environment, instead of it all being kind of fantasy, and having it be new characters with different stories, kind of more team based, because it was always cool to see how the animators did the guns, because it always felt like such a different arc, that one with Xenon. And then, you know, there's potentially the idea that, you know, maybe we might see some familiar characters. There might be a reference here or there to Xenon as like this ultimate sniper. It'd be cool if she was maybe made an appearance at some point. But I think it also is it leaves a potential for them to explore the game further. Now, I don't know how many volumes this is. I haven't really looked into, like, in the Japanese edition, how far this manga goes. Is it like a set length and it's over now? Or is it more of an ongoing thing like some of the other stories? That's what I'm not sure about. But the fact that it's getting an anime suggests that it's you know, at least a pretty solid story that goes on for a few more volumes. I know from the trailer for the anime, there's one or two characters they introduce, they kind of show off there, that haven't been so far introduced here. That said, we get a shot of all of the teams, but we don't actually we get a shot of the other teams, but we don't get to see like introductions to characters as such. So that's the kind of way they go about it. So yeah, they show off the other teams here very quickly, but really don't draw attention much to it. Yeah, that's the review for Sword Art Online Alternative Gale Online Volume 1. If you just haven't been aware that this has existed, or have been maybe avoiding it, I'd recommend it. I really, really liked it. I went in knowing kind of nothing about it really, beyond that it was getting an anime. And I was pleasantly surprised with how invested I was kind of just reading through it. They instantly have a good premise with the character and her kind of issue with her height, and you know, the introduction of the various characters of Pito Hui and then M coming into play was all pretty well done. The other thing though I thought was really kind of interesting, maybe a little obvious, or maybe I just potentially figured something out, is that they make a note of basically saying, okay, Pito Hui is unavailable on this specific day, and they also note about her schedule that it could go weeks between Len seeing Pito Hui online in the game, and she would come back just for like a day and then be gone for a week and then come back, and then obviously on the day of the important, you know, event in game that it would seem like she's all for, she's missing. And then the other thing they also say is that she has this huge collection of guns, like super rare guns, and she explains that she got them because she spent real money to get those guns, and it's kind of noted that she's rich. And then the thing that they do is that they say that, okay, our main character Karen was unable to get tickets to her favorite singer, Elsa, I think it is, who really means a lot to her, which is on the same day as the event. So, probably an obvious prediction, but Pito Hui probably is the singer Elsa, more than likely, because she sends, I think, a letter to Elsa explaining how important her music is to her. And I can definitely see that coming back, that when that reveal comes out, that's going to be a pretty cool moment, if that is indeed how it actually is. But yeah, that's been the review. In the comments, let me know if you have read it, if you're at all interested in it, or if you didn't even know about the anime. Let me know your thoughts. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.